Hey everyone, this is a bonus interview I'm posting on top of my regularly scheduled content. I actually did this interview with Weightman last year and have been waiting for the right time to post it, and circumstances have made that time right now. Interviews with other former Scientologists provide a more balanced approach than just listening to me. In addition, I'm hoping that existing Scientologists will potentially hear some of these interviews and maybe relate to some of the experiences these people describe and start questioning what's going on around them. Unlike the first two interviews I've done, this time our interviewee is a second-generation Scientologist, meaning he was born into a family of Scientologists. Not only that, but Shane's parents were actually members of the Sea organization. Also, Shane was born and raised in Europe. He grew up in France and eventually ended up at a Scientology boarding school in England. If you've watched any of my videos or seen the other interviews on my channel, you'll see an amazing number of similarities between the Scientology experience here in the US and across the pond. But for Shane, there were also some very key differences. In this first part, let's get all the details of his upbringing in a Scientology world. Here's Shane. Have you ever been interviewed or told your story in any kind of a public way?
No. I've told hundreds of people about it, but never publicly.
Okay, so this is kind of your first time out.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yep. Well, this is good. I really
yeah, no problem. I was on Marty's blog a couple of times, but that was nothing super detailed, you know.
Okay. Was there ever an article or anything about you or your story?
Not about growing up in Scientology,
but
about Chrissy and my story and what was happening at Flag, and there was a whole article when we got married and all that stuff.
Okay, great. Yeah. Okay, good. Well, we'll find out about all that.
Yep.
Good. So let's just do a little chronological review to start with.
Okay.
Okay, good. So when did your parents get into Scientology?
Both in their 20s, when they were pretty young.
Okay. And how did that happen and where?
So my dad was in England, in Manchester. And he was into drugs and that kind of stuff. He was kind of a total hippie dude. He was in a band, long hair, all that stuff.
Oh, wow.
And one of the bands that he loved, he ended up going backstage, and they were Scientologists. Oh. And so that's how he got into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And had he met your mom at that point? Or?
No. She was in France, in Paris.
Okay.
And that's where each one of them are from, by the way. But so she was there. When she was in her 20s, she was looking for something religious, spiritual. She was going to take a huge trip to India and the Middle East and explore her spirituality, and she stumbled upon Scientology. I think she got buddy routed or something like that.
Man, and she could have had such an adventure.
Yeah.
Instead.
Yeah, she took a course. I don't know if it was KSW or, SDCC or something like that.
Oh, yeah, the Success Through Communications course.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so then, so your father was French, and he's over in Birmingham.
Other way around.
Oh.
My father's English.
Your father's English.
In Manchester.
Got it.
All the towns are confusing, but he's English, my mom's French.
Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, got it. And so they're not together yet. They haven't even met yet.
Correct.
And they both got into Scientology separately.
Correct. So they both ended up going to the Sea Org on their own. They got married separately to other people.
Oh.
Both Scientologists. They had kids, and then they ended up separating from their partners and both being moved to St. Hill.
Got it. Okay.
In the Sea Org.
Okay.
And so they met there in the Sea Org at St. Hill.
Okay. Now, about what year was it that they met?
Early to mid 80s, something like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And at what point, how long have they been in at that point?
Maybe 15 years already, something like that.
Okay.
Between 10 and 20 years, I want to say. So,
wow. Okay, so they were both veterans by the time they met.
Yeah.
Okay. And they had, now what happened to those kids that they had both had separately?
They both went with them and were in the cadet org at St. Hill.
Oh, okay, so there was a cadet org at St. Hill.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm only familiar with the one in Los Angeles.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
And in base. Yeah. So there was one of course there was one at St. Hill.
Yeah, so my mom had 2 kids.
Okay.
A boy and a girl, and my dad had 1 girl.
Okay. Okay, got it. So there were kind of two Brady Bunch families at St. Hill.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Then they meet and,
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So then when do you come into the picture?
So my parents were still in the Sea Org, and I was, in '86, there was a flag policy or some sort of policy that came out
Mm-hmm.
about not being able to have kids in the Sea Org anymore.
That's right, because what had been happening, now this is interesting because, so your parents were in the mid-'80s
Yeah.
at St. Hill,
Yeah.
still on a Sea Org base, kids
Yeah.
in the cadet org. Now around that time is when there was a policy that came down where any more kids come in and you get shipped off to a class 5 org,
Exactly.
to a local church.
Exactly.
And I was staff in Santa Barbara at that time and we had 3 Sea Org couples show up.
Yeah.
With baby in tow, right?
Yeah.
None of whom, by the way, survived, right?
Right.
And, I mean, they obviously survived. I mean, they didn't survive on staff.
Yeah.
All of them blew,
Yeah.
right? Took off. So then, by 1995, I joined the Sea Org.
Okay.
I go down to LA, I get married, and in 1996, down comes the hammer, right?
Right.
If you have kids, you're out of the Sea Org, no more kids.
Right.
So this was happening over there too.
Yeah.
So then what happened?
Okay, so in
Oh, what year were you born?
'88.
Okay, so you were around. Okay, but they didn't ship your folks off to a class 5 org.
Well, they did.
Oh, okay. Tell me about that.
So they got married mid-'80s. I want to say
Okay.
'86, 2 years before I was born. And they wanted to have kids. They knew that they wanted to have a kid together. And so they went to St. Hill, and they were at NOSA at this time, and they said, listen, we want to have a kid. We're aware of this policy. Why don't you ship us?
Okay.
So my mom being originally from Paris, and essentially they decided to ship him back to Paris Org.
Okay.
And then my mom was shipped to OSA in Paris Org. My dad as well, but down the line he ended up moving over to Brussels, or traveling back over to Brussels, to Belgium, and opening up the Human Rights Office there.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Much later. When they
Pretty
opened
soon
it
after,
up.
yeah.
Oh really? Okay.
Yeah. I don't exactly know when, to be honest, when they opened it up, but
Oh.
it was pretty soon after that he was starting to travel back and forth a lot between Brussels and Paris.
And this was still when you were just very small.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize the Human Rights Office in Belgium was around that long. I only first heard of it where I was at in the late '90s or 2000s. That's interesting.
I think, I'm not 100% on the timeline, because again, I was 5-10 years old or whatever.
Sure.
I just always remember him going off to Belgium, and then I get excited when he'd come back home on the weekends and stuff like that. So.
Right. Okay.
But so my parents weren't moved as staff members; they were still Sea Org.
Right.
Because some people decided to leave the Sea Org and become staff members still when they moved out, but they stayed Sea Org.
Okay.
And my mom was in OSA, and then down the line ended up running the OSA office at Paris.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So she was so they were basically stationed in Paris org, but your dad traveling back
Yeah.
and forth on his little project.
Yeah, it was easier for him to actually work in Brussels because his French was very limited.
Okay.
And they spoke English in Brussels at the Human Rights Office. Everybody was speaking English between themselves over there.
Okay.
Because OSA is pretty legal, a lot of legal terms and all that stuff, it kind of flew over my dad's head. I mean, he spoke basic French, but I think he enjoyed that more because it was easier for him.
Sure, makes sense. Okay. So you grew up in Paris org.
I was born Scientologist, yep. Grew up in
Okay.
Paris Org.
Okay.
A lot of my friends were at CC Paris, but I was in Paris Org.
Okay. So what's your earliest memory of an org, being in the org? What was the org like?
I don't remember. I mean, it was definitely Paris Org. I don't remember the address and stuff, but
Yeah.
you'd walk in and it was this huge room. It was oval shaped. It had this big glass window, and then there was a counter, like reception was to your left, and I couldn't even see over the counter. I remember trying to pull myself up to try to see the receptionist and stuff, but I remember I'd go there after school while my mom was working in OSA, and there were a couple other kids my age, and we would We would run around and
Did you just terrorize the org?
Yeah, no, we pretty much did.
Yeah.
We'd run past the auditing rooms and scream, and
Yeah.
I remember once we found this room that had these giant rolls of bubble wrap, and we just destroyed the entire rolls. It was pretty fun.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. That's so funny. I grew up the exact same way in Pasadena Mission.
Yeah.
The Mission in Pasadena. I was a red rat running around.
Yeah, exactly.
Constantly getting into people's offices. And
Yeah.
okay, so then what did you ever get onto course? Did they have you do children's courses?
Yeah.
How did that go? What was that like?
Paris org moved around, I think, another once or twice after that to bigger and better locations,
Okay.
supposedly. But yeah, I ended up doing, I think one of my first courses was like the children's communication course, or was that big booklet? It talks about the dynamics and all the basics of Scientology and stuff.
Oh.
Teaches you about the ARC triangle.
Well, there's not the HQS course.
No, it was like the dumbed down version of the HQS course.
So some sort of what is Scientology kind of course.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So you were doing that. How old were you when you actually started getting involved in that?
I want to say 6 or 7.
Okay.
Something like that, yeah.
And was there any sort of like, I want to do this, or was it, Shane, here, go in this room and you're going to read this book and you're going to do this, and how did it go down?
You know, it's kind of vague. I think it was a mixture, you know. I wanted to do it because I saw people doing it, you know, and I saw my mom going on course rarely, or I saw people going on course. I was like, oh, I guess I could do it. And I was at the org after school pretty much every day.
Okay.
So,
wow. So you were that was like a second home to you.
Yeah, I had nothing else to do. So
right.
Instead of running around, they were like, maybe we can get some points out of him or something.
Right.
So yeah, I ended up doing the course that way.
Do you know if your parents had to pay for the courses?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I think they did.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would make sense because you weren't a staff member.
Yeah, no, I wasn't staff. They were still Sea Org at that point.
Right.
They were Sea Org for a very long time. Even though we paid for our own rent and food and all that stuff, we were still Sea Org.
Right. Now, how was your living situation during that time that you were growing up?
We were pretty lucky. My grandma's lived in Paris, you know, most of her life, and so she owned an apartment in the western suburb of Paris. It's called Boulogne.
Okay.
And she owned it outright. So she also, with her husband, my grandpa, owned another apartment. So we were able to stay in that apartment for free.
Oh, so you had it a lot easier than other Sea Org couples who got shipped out to orgs.
Yeah, to some degree. And because we were lucky, but I still remember there'd be holes in the carpet and I remember that.
Okay, so
with just concrete right underneath.
Alright, so it wasn't a swanky apartment.
It was not a swanky apartment. It was I loved it. You know, there was like an outside terrace and it was kind of cool. You know, like I never realized, you know, being a Scientologist, not being, or whatever, or, you know.
Right.
I was just, I guess, happy to, whatever.
Right.
That was pretty easy going.
Did it ever come up, when did you notice that other kids and their parents weren't Scientologists and didn't know anything about it, and that, you know, maybe your parents weren't living the same life everybody else was?
Very late.
Really?
Yeah, because I went to Scientology school, so all my friends were Scientologists.
Oh.
Every single one.
Okay.
And I just didn't know otherwise, you know?
Okay.
You know, and we had food, we had rent, I had clothes, you know, we were okay.
Everything looked normal.
Yeah, everything looked normal. I just never realized that I could have had a total altered life, I guess.
Right.
But I never resented it. I think, to answer your question, I started realizing that later when I was 10, I got shipped over to boarding school.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, well, not too much later. 10 years old, still pretty young.
Yeah.
Okay, so so boarding school.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So let's back up a second then.
Up.
Good. Okay, so you were going to a private Scientology school?
Yeah.
Okay, and what was the Scientology exposure there? What was that like, going to that school?
So it was, the school was called École de l'Éveil, School of Awakening.
Oh,
yeah,
of
not
course.
shady at all, right? Just,
yeah.
I only realized that like 2 years ago when I did the translation. I was like, wait, what?
Yes.
But Yeah, it was a private school. It was about an hour away from the apartment.
How did you get there?
So every morning, my mom we would get on the subway. It's called the Metro in Paris. We'd get on the Metro. Actually, we'd walk 5 minutes. We'd take a bus for about 10 minutes. And then we'd get on the subway for about 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
So it'd take us about an hour to get there. And every day she'd take me.
Wow.
And then every day she'd pick me up. Unless there were older kids that were going to the org. And they would give me rides.
Okay. So she was on the Metro for 4 hours a day, taking you to and from...
No, because Paris org was fairly close to the school.
Oh,
it was
okay.
Probably
so it was,
about...
Okay.
Well, I don't remember where the first location was.
Yeah.
But the second or the last location that I remember was probably about 20 minutes from that. So.
Okay. So it was part of her routine.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, she'd drop me off and then she'd head almost backwards to go to the...
Back to the org.
Back to the org.
Okay, got it. So what was that school environment like?
It was very much... See, education in Europe and schools in Europe are very strict. So... We'll get into it a little bit later, but the school in England, Greenfields, that I went to, that's a Scientology school, the teachers have to be certified. You can't just hire some random schmo off the street.
Oh.
So they're actually, decent teachers.
Even the Scientology private or the Scientology schools.
I feel like I had a good education. I feel like I missed out on some departments that I didn't have the options on. You know? So we learned contacts and we learned... we didn't really get into conditions too much.
Contacts, you mean contact assists?
Contact assists, yeah.
Okay, so they were teaching you Scientology stuff. Straight up Scientology. I mean, contact assists is... Yeah. That's just straight up Scientology.
Yeah, and that I don't know if it's the school teaching it to me or my parents teaching it to me, but everybody's a Scientologist there, so everybody's doing it.
Okay, so if somebody fell down and got hurt...
Yeah, you do.
They were doing contact assists.
Yeah.
Okay. Did they have... other aspects of the Scientology in the curriculum or in the...
So when I was really young, obviously, you're a kid, so it doesn't matter too much. But as you start studying, I remember having my own dictionary.
Okay.
So I remember they were doing study tech. I remember doing clay demos. I remember doing demos on my desk and things like that.
Sure. Okay. Okay, so demo kits and that kind of
stuff.
Yep. Okay, got it. So that's just part of standard Scientology study technology. It's a body of stuff that includes demonstration kits, little bits of things that you can...
And you do the study technology courses there. So there's a very basic one for kids. I remember doing that in my school.
Right, children's study course.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, got it. So what about ethics?
There was ethics. At that time I was...
You were still below 10.
I was still below 10.
Okay, so it's not like you were doing OW write-ups or...
No,
like that.
Although I did do that at Greenfields when we get that later. But, I'm sure they had that for the older kids. Okay. I just don't remember. I do remember being sent to the principal's office. I don't know that I was disciplined in a Scientology or non-Scientology way. I don't remember.
Got it. Totally fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was basically, but was it mainly reading, writing, arithmetic? Sort of.
Yeah. I learned basics. I learned reading. Yeah. It was probably some Montessori based, kind of thing, because I know a lot of Scientologists do that too. So.
Sure.
But yeah, no, I learned math. I learned all the regular subjects. French, not English, obviously, because it was in France.
Yeah, right. It's over in France. Everybody's talking French.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Of course. Did they have pictures of L. Ron Hubbard on the wall? Do you remember?
I think not in the classrooms.
Okay.
But in some of the offices, yeah.
So you went from that to when you were 10 years old, you said you went to boarding school?
Yeah.
What happened with that?
Well, before I get to that, a couple more awesome stories.
Yeah, bring it.
So École de Réveil eventually closed down when I was about 8, and then moved over even further, literally to the other side of Paris, into Institut Aubert, which is the Aubert Institute. That was just the name of the school.
Okay.
And that's just because the first building closed down, and I don't really know why it closed down. I don't know if it was rent. I remember media coming a bunch of times, and the teachers would tell them to buzz off, and then I'd see it on the news at night, and I'd be like, "What's happening?"
Wow.
Yeah, obviously, because Scientology in France has been attacked very heavily.
Oh,
So,
they're right. The government's a bit more
yeah,
on the ball over there.
yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
And having none of it, so we moved over to another school. My guess a few years back was that they found out we were a Scientology school for sure, closed it down, and then we closed the company, or they closed the school or the company, and then reopened it somewhere else. Under a different name, under a different person, and
of course they did.
Yeah.
Like,
so
what else are they gonna do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, it'd still be 5-minute walk to the bus, 15-minute bus ride to the metro, and then it was an hour all the way.
Wow.
There.
Okay.
So it started off that my mom would stop at her stop, and then I would make it the rest of the way.
Okay.
And I was 8, 9 years old at this point in Paris, so I felt proud. I felt like a big boy, but looking at it now,
a little off the rails.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, I do remember my mom being worried, and she wanted me to take judo and things like that, but I was like, no, I'll be fine. I'm tough. So,
were your brothers or sisters or were they involved with this at all? Were they going to the same schools or anything like that?
For a little bit, they are all much older than me.
Sure. Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Earlier parents.
So exactly. So on my mom's side, my brother, he's 12 years older than me. My sister is 9 years older.
Okay.
And then on my dad's side, my sister is 12 years older than me.
Okay. So that's significantly older.
So yeah, they stopped going to Scientology schools, when I was about 5, because they were pretty much done with schooling and all that kind of stuff.
Right. They're leaving, you're just going in.
Yeah. But even then, they went to their own school that was in Boulogne where we lived. They didn't go to the Scientology schools the entire time.
Okay.
So.
All right. So you're like the baby of the family.
Yeah, I totally am.
Okay.
By 9 years.
Yeah.
Huge gap. It's like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I forgot to say, obviously my brothers and sisters all moved with us in that apartment when we moved from Stonelands, which was where everybody was living at St. Hill.
Okay.
That was the Seward thing.
Stonelands.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stonelands was one of the buildings. There were others. I don't remember exactly which one they were at, but
sure.
They were there for a while and they moved with us.
Okay. All right, so this thing got closed down. You moved over there, and then so you're going to that for about 2 years?
Yeah, my mom ended up having to get a second job to help with bills and things like that.
Okay, so now they're starting to feel the crunch.
Yeah, exactly. So I ended up riding all the way by myself to school every morning.
Wow. So you're 9 years old, 10 years old, on the metro in Paris by yourself.
Yeah. I remember when
wow.
Yeah, and I'd have to wake up really early to make it there in time. And I'd fall asleep on people's shoulders and...
Wow.
Yeah, and...
Ever any close calls or anything? I mean, did they ever have any trouble?
My mom was pretty good about making sure I knew how to do it. Before she left me doing it by myself, we did the whole path with me ahead of her. By 100 yards, and she would just make sure I was okay.
Right.
We did that once or twice, and she was fine.
So no worries about you getting lost.
No worries about me getting lost. She was worried about me being, kidnapped and things like that, but she didn't have a choice,
Right.
It was like, you have to get to school. I have to work. My dad is in Belgium.
Right.
So
he's commuting back and forth.
Yeah, he could drop me off on Monday morning, and that's usually what he would do, but the rest of the week I have to do it by myself. So never any close calls. I remember people would come and talk to me every now and then, and you always have weirdos on the metro in Paris.
I would imagine.
Bums begging for money and
right.
But I was never kidnapped or anything like that.
So,
no.
Yeah. Good.
Thank God.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so good. So then what happened once? How did that picture turn into boarding school? How did that go?
Things started getting worse for Scientology in Paris.
Okay, and about what year was this again?
1999.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Around there. I didn't know this at the time, but I found out that the school was offering a summer trip to England. And the French school ends about a month earlier than the English school for summer.
Oh.
Because we have think we either had more breaks or less breaks, or it was something like that where it worked out. But they offered a trip to England to all the kids.
Okay.
Well, they didn't offer it. We had to pay for it. But, they organized something. And we ended up going to Greenfields school. And we stayed in the boarding house at Greenfields school for about a month.
Huh.
And at the time, I thought this was a cool vacation. We do ski trips twice a year for my school. Well, a summer trip for hiking and then the winter trip for skiing. And things like that. So they offered an England trip, and I was like, oh, cool. So
were they affiliated with Greenfields at all, or they just both happened to be Scientology?
Both happened
schools?
to be applied scholastic schools.
Okay, but they weren't not same owner or anything like
that.
No,
totally different.
But since they were all Scientologists, it was kind of one big happy family.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
So they arranged this trip, and then it's like, oh well, we have a place that they can sleep.
Yeah, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you hanging out the whole time at Greenfields, or were you actually getting out into the England?
So there was Greenfields. At the time, Greenfields was the school. Coombe Hall was the boarding house.
Okay.
And then we only stayed at Coombe Hall. We never actually went to school at Greenfields.
Okay.
We visited it, I think, for an hour or something like that one day, but we really just stayed at Coombe Hall the entire time.
Oh.
Which now thinking about it is even more shady. I mean, I got into town.
Yeah.
I was able to go watch movies and things like that into town.
But you were basically just relocated.
Yeah.
For a month.
Yeah, and we did schooling. They had this room in the back of this building that was just like a one-off classroom kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
And the 15 of us that could afford to go just ended up staying there for about a month. And then Coombe Hall had a whole third floor where everybody stayed.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay, and this was just a summer trip.
Summer trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like go hang out in a room in England.
Yeah.
And go out sometimes.
And it was fun for us because we were in England and we got to try salt and vinegar, chips and fish and chips and all that kind of stuff. So so they made it a camp for us,
Okay.
But fast forwarding, 5 years ago, I found out, or Chrissy found out by asking my parents what happened, and it turns out that there were police and SWAT raids going on in Paris. And, yeah, they had closed the school that we were at.
Okay.
And the police raided our apartment, like where I lived.
What?
Through paperwork, yeah, all sorts of stuff.
Wow.
But all the parents got together in the school and said, let's send them to boarding school or to camp in England for a month or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I don't remember what it was, but
so this is just keep the kids safe kind of a deal.
It's keep them in the dark, really. I mean, safe to some degree, so that because if I had lived with my parents and I was in that apartment during the time of the raid, there was a chance that child services could have come and taken me away because of how severe things were at the time.
Wow.
Yeah. I think there was a lot of OSA things going on, a lot of stuff that I probably still don't know about,
Okay. Oh, so, so this puts a whole different...
Yeah.
This is a whole different picture now.
And I never knew this until I left.
Right.
I always thought it was an awesome trip.
Summer camp.
Summer camp. And then that was the last year of having an applied scholastic school in France.
Okay, so they shut the whole thing down, and there was no opening it up under a different name.
No, there was
that was it.
There was some private homeschooling going on, private tutoring and all that kind of stuff. But that was it as an official school building kind of thing.
Okay.
And so the next year I went to Greenfields.
Okay.
And so I was in boarding school at Coombe Hall, and then I went into school. EFL was the English as a first language or foreign language or something.
Okay.
And I was intensely taught English because I didn't speak English at the time.
You grew up in France.
I grew up in France.
Right.
And even though my dad was English and tried to teach me English, I never wanted anything to do with it.
Really?
Yeah.
Because you had no use for it because you were in France, or?
I don't know. I guess
just like English.
I guess I was a stubborn French guy.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, and I don't know why I never did. I had many chances. I did English in school and things, but I just never wanted to do it.
Oh.
Properly. And my grandparents are English. I'd go see them every year, so I knew stuff like I want to go to the swimming pool. You know, like
Okay.
I'm hungry or whatever. You
Right.
know. But yeah, I was kind of thrown in the deep end, and just I had to learn English. I didn't have a
Right. Because
choice.
now you're in an English boarding school, so
Yeah.
it's like sink or swim.
Yeah, pretty much.
And you're 10 years old.
Yeah, and I'm French, and I'm in England, which is never fun.
Okay. Is there a thing with that?
To some degree,
The
yeah.
nationality sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of teasing. Obviously, there's a lot of history between the French and the English, with wars and
Yeah,
things
of
like
course.
that. But
So the English Scientology kids are still
Tease.
just as mean as
Yeah,
the
yeah,
regular English
there's no
kids.
difference.
Yeah. Okay. They're still gonna be because
Yeah.
you're French.
yeah,
Okay.
so I was put in this program, and I learned English in about a month.
Wow.
And then I was thrown in class with all the other English kids, and continued my schooling from there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you have much call for French from that point? I guess just when you went back home, or
Yeah, so every vacation, I'd fly back and forth,
Okay.
which was great. And I hated England. I hated the weather. I hated the food. I
Okay.
hated the people. But
Wow.
but luckily at Greenfields there were a lot of foreigners, because Scientologists from all over Europe flew to the boarding school
Right.
where I was at.
Well, it sounds like probably. I mean, for France, it was a bit of a sanctuary for the
Yeah,
kids.
and not that many of them came over, by the way. Only like 2 of my close friends came over, and then there were another 3 or 4, maybe 15 during my whole tenure at
Really?
Greenfields. Yeah.
So all the other French Scientology kids got homeschooled, or?
Some got homeschooled, some got put into public schools.
Oh, right.
some-
They just went to regular school.
Yeah.
Okay.
We were pretty lucky because my grandma, while she's not filthy rich, she had a little bit of money, and she paid for a lot of the tuitions.
Okay.
Otherwise, my parents, there's no way they would have been able to afford.
Yeah, because they were
My
just your mom was still
schooling and
working to keep just to pay some bills.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
And this is your grandparents on your mother's side, the French ones.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, because you still had grandparents in England, but
Mhm.
they weren't footing the bill for any of this.
Not that I'm
Not
aware
that you
of.
know of.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. So how long were you at Greenfields?
8 years.
Okay, so you went from 10 until you graduated.
Yeah.
All right, and what was that like? What was that experience? And I know you don't have public school experience to
Yeah.
relate it to.
I literally have 0 public school experience.
Wow.
So I'm like.
Okay, so, well, let me ask you some specific questions then.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so were Hubbard's pictures in the classrooms?
Not in. So there were smaller classrooms for specific subjects, and then there was a course room
Okay.
where everybody would do their theory side, and then go to these individual classrooms for the practical side.
Oh,
In the
okay.
theory side, there was a picture of LRH.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the theory room was basically like all subjects.
For
This
the
is where
most
you
part,
sit and
yeah.
study, and you had a course supervisor
Yeah.
who would come around and
2 or 3
make
spot
sure you weren't
checks,
falling asleep.
spot checks, pink
Yeah.
sheets,
Okay.
demos, all that stuff.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
so in other words, the full gamut. I mean, for anybody who's watching this who's not familiar with all this stuff, I mean, I'm a trained course supervisor in Scientology, and there's like a whole, and you are too.
Yeah.
So there's a whole body of methodologies to this,
Yeah.
right? Like a course supervisor isn't considered a teacher,
Yeah, they don't teach anything whatsoever.
right?
Yeah.
They're supposed to make sure that the student is studying his materials and that the materials are teaching the student.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trained to do this by watching for if the student is falling asleep
Yeah.
or getting drowsy or exhibiting any physical manifestations that indicate that there's something not optimum according to Hubbard's study
Yeah.
technology.
Yeah.
And so that's how you were taught.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you had textbooks, regular textbooks?
Um,
Or did you, like at Delphi, they have
Half-
special,
half and half.
okay.
Like our physics teacher, his name is Jeff Smith. He was awesome. I mean, he knew everything there was to know about physics.
Okay.
So he wrote his own textbooks for the first, I want to say, for my first 4 years there, I used his own textbooks,
Okay.
which were great. They had pictures, they were detailed. You could go and do experiments and test it out and understand. But some others, like history, it was just a big old textbook, and it was like, wow.
Right.
And
Start reading.
yeah.
Okay, and you had check sheets?
Yep, had check sheets for every subject.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and a check sheet being an itemized list of things to study,
Yeah.
and then write this essay,
Yeah.
then study this chapter,
Yeah.
and then do a little demonstration.
Yeah.
Okay.
And literally it'd be, you know, theory, you study, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Then you'd write an essay or do a clay demo, and then you'd go over to the practical course room, and then you do an exercise either with a twin or somebody that they partner you with,
Yeah.
or you go to the actual classroom where where you can do the experiments and all that stuff.
Okay.
So,
Wow, this is interesting. Your entire education was this way.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay,
It
got
types.
it. Interesting.
So when I did Scientology courses, it was completely natural to me
Right.
because it was the exact same method that I did at school.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Interesting.
To the T. I mean, it was.
Interesting. And and honestly, I mean, if that was all there was to it, there's nothing evil and mind controlling about, having a check sheet.
Yeah,
and
no,
going and studying things.
There isn't, and like I said, in England, there's very strict guidelines about what you have to teach kids, and they
Right.
followed those. I felt like, whenever I did happen to speak to somebody who wasn't a Scientologist or didn't go to Greenfields, I was level, if not better, than most of them were.
Right. During this study time, during the time that you were at Greenfields, did they ever slip in, like what was the Scientology influence? Did you get Scientology stuff taught to you as well during this time period? As part of the curriculum?
Never religiously. There was
Okay.
never a Scientology class or anything like that.
Okay.
Now, I was on course on some evenings or on weekends and stuff like that. Same for some of my friends.
Scientology courses.
Scientology courses, yeah.
And you knew you were doing Scientology.
At,
like it was.
at St. Hill.
Oh, so you actually went over
Yeah,
to St. Hill.
sorry.
You knew you were doing Scientology. What was the first one that you did?
At St. Hill?
Yeah.
I think it was STCC.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's for the communications course.
Yeah.
And how old were you when you did that?
It's probably 12.
Okay.
11 or 12. Something like that, yeah.
Huh.
'Cause I was still in boarding school when I did it.
Yeah. How did that come up? How was that offered to you, or did you walk up to
So I'd been on course when I was in Paris, and it took me a little while to get used to, learning English and being in class and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But eventually, there were older kids at Greenfields who would drive to St. Hill.
Oh.
And I'd go to St. Hill for all the events and all that stuff throughout the year.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Oh, of course you did.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to St. Hill and you're seeing CEO, Chairman of the Board, David Miscavige, on stage,
Yeah.
briefing all the Scientologists,
Yeah, now I would...
and your parents aren't around.
Right.
You're being supervised by the teachers from Greenfields, or?
It was pretty terrible. You'd usually get a Scientology teacher or parent coming.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I'd only last like a minute in the event, and then I'd leave.
Oh, you did?
And then we would just run around all over St. Hill.
Okay.
And
I was wondering how much
yeah.
indoctrination was going on at that point.
They used to set up a creche.
Uh-uh.
Creche, it's like, it's a French word for kindergarten, like a place where you keep kids.
Oh, like a childcare.
Like a childcare, yeah.
Okay.
So they'd set one of those up, and they'd have Sea Org members watch it.
Right.
And of course, there would be like 150 kids. And we would all just push the Sea Org members away and just run over.
Okay, so you're literally spending most of these event times running around the grounds of St. Hill.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm still there, and there's still Sea Org members trying to recruit you, and there's still staff members.
Oh, okay. Now we're definitely going to talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get to that. But I want to. At what point do you recall sitting down through? Was there ever any point while you were at Greenfields where you sat through a whole Scientology event?
Probably when I got older, yeah.
Like do you remember?
15, 16, something like that,
Okay.
I think. But even then, I was just like, how much longer is this going to last?
Okay,
I remember
so it
my
wasn't.
butt getting numb. I remember
Okay.
clapping a million times and all that stuff.
Right, all the standing up and sitting down and all that.
Yeah.
So did it always seem, like the entire time you were there, did it always seem sort of something that somebody else was doing, that you were just having to be there, or were you ever, I want to know what's going on here, I want to be part of this?
I never felt like I wanted to know what's going on with Scientology,
Uh-huh.
but I felt like I should be on course.
Okay, that's
I
interesting.
felt like that was part of something I'm supposed to do,
Oh.
Because, I guess maybe because I'd been doing it when I was in Paris. I'd come directly from the school in Paris by myself to the org or with some of my friends,
Right.
and then I'd go on course. And my mom would work till 10, 11, midnight, 1.
Wow.
You know, especially if it was Wednesday night.
Of course.
And it's Thursday.
Before Thursday too, yeah.
We'd get home so late that the metro wouldn't be able to take us all the way home. And we'd have to get out, take either a bunch of different buses to finally get home, or take a cab to get home. But I'd pass out on my mom, and she'd have to carry me home. And then I'd have to be up at like 5 or 6 the next day to...
And this is just how you grew up. This is just normal.
Yeah, this is how I grew up, yeah.
Right. Thursday at 2 is... every Church of Scientology operates on a week-to-week basis, and the week starts and ends at Thursday at 2 o'clock, which means that all the production that occurs from Thursday 2 until the next Thursday 2 is counted as 1 week of production. And they measure their statistics by this, and this is how well they're doing, and that sort of thing, every staff member. And every church operates this way, from the bottom churches, from the lowest level, all the way to the highest levels. So Thursday 2 was significant for you growing up.
Yeah, so from about Wednesday lunchtime to about Thursday at 2 p.m. is when all the staff members go crazy.
Right, that's when they actually work.
That's when they, if they're not working hard, they're working insanely hard to try to meet their quotas and their stats and all that stuff. I mean, my mom sometimes wouldn't even come home.
Wow.
She'd just work through the night. And it got to a point, I mean, sometimes my sisters would take me home and stuff like that. It's not like I was at the org every single night. I remember having a babysitter for a little while, and she would take me, by babysitter I mean an older kid at the school I was at would just take me home, you know?
Wow.
Yeah, I remember waking up in the middle of the night sometimes and having no idea because it was Thursday 2 p.m., but I'd wake up and neither of my parents were there.
Wow.
Now my sister, there'd always be somebody at home with me, but, you know, it'd freak me out. I'd be like, did my mom die? You know, what happened? And so it was
Thursday
scary.
Too?
It's just Thursday 2 p.m. So
wow. And this is just how you grew up?
Yep.
Okay, so getting back to Greenfields, so you're regularly going on course because that was just sort of the thing to do. That was just part of your life.
Yeah, that's what I've been
going
doing
on course.
Yeah.
Okay, and so so you're doing that nights. Did you guys? So you were in a boarding school. It's not like you had homework.
I did have homework.
Oh, you did.
Oh,
you had out of class work.
Yeah, I had a ton of out of class work.
Okay.
We pretty much school was at Greenfields would start I think at 9 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was separated into 4 or 5 classes per day, with a small break in between and lunch between 12 and 1 or something like that. But we'd end school up pretty late at about like 5:30.
Wow, that is a very full day for a kid in school.
Most other kids, you know, regular kids, would get out in England at about 3.
Right.
They'd start at 8, I think, but they'd still get out 2.5 hours before we did.
Right.
But again, for me, that was normal.
Right. I was going to say, you were never exposed to that.
No. So
this was just how it was with you.
Yeah. So not only did the days last till about 5:30, the boarders, the guys who are in boarding school, would then go back home. We'd have dinner, I think, from about 6 to 6:30, and between 7 and 8, we'd have homework time.
Okay.
And everybody would come down in the main hall, and everybody would study for an hour, if not 2.
Okay. And then you go to bed.
And then you pretty much have to go to bed.
Wow, it was like a little mini Sea Org.
It's a mini Sea Org. And then on top of that, every boarding school student has duties that they have to do.
Of course.
So you have your own little cleaning station.
Right.
And there's 2 kids that are doing the stairs, and there's 2 kids that are doing the vacuuming, and there's 2 kids that are doing the dusting.
Right, why have janitors? Because you have this little workforce right
free
here.
Free labor.
Exactly.
It's not like we paid thousands of pounds to be there, you know?
Right.
It's crazy. The kids who... Oh, let me go back.
Yeah.
Speaking of duties, let me go back to my schooling in France.
Yeah.
To make things even cheaper, I remember there was 1 cook at the school.
Okay.
Now, there's maybe... It's not a very big school, you know? There's maybe 100 kids there.
Okay.
You know,
this is like when you're 6, 7, 8, 9 years old.
Yeah, all those years. Every day, 1 or 2 kids from my class would be picked to help cook.
Really?
Yeah.
They didn't do school that day.
Well, no, they'd leave. They'd come in at 9,
Yeah.
right? We'd maybe study for an hour, and then around 10 or 11, excuse me, around 10 or 11, 2 kids would be picked to go cook. And they would help out the cook with pouring pasta in the water or stirring it or opening up tomato jars or whatever.
Huh.
Yeah. And so it was awesome
so they
for
weren't,
us.
They weren't going to school that day.
It was cooking class.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Which is great because I know how to cook. And I loved it. But thinking back on it, it's free cooks, free labor. You know, you'd peel carrots for an hour and a half, or you'd peel vegetables, or...
You're like 6, 7, 8 years old doing this.
And 2 other kids, after lunch, would have to do all the dishes.
What?
Yeah, they wouldn't get a lunch break.
What?
No lunch break. You do all the dishes. So you're trying to do them real fast to go outside and play. And then right when you're done with the dishes, you can go play. Or you have to stay and miss class until you're done with the dishes.
Wow.
Yeah, and you get soaked, obviously, because you're 6, you're trying to wash a million plates at a million miles an hour, and
your parents are paying for this.
oh yeah, they're paying.
Yeah.
And to make it even better,
Yeah.
the lunches, the lunches were in England. They were okay. I mean, it was English food, which I hated, but they were pretty decent. In France, if there's one thing I hate, and to be totally stereotypical, ratatouille.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't mind tomatoes and stuff, but like hot cooked tomatoes, I hate it. Onions, I used to hate, and courgettes, I used to hate. Courgettes are like, they're kind of like, they look like cucumbers.
Oh.
But they're a little bit more acidic.
Okay.
And you cook them as opposed to having them fresh.
Okay.
And so those are pretty much the 3 vegetables that I could stand, and cooking them all together and just one big plate. That was your lunch sometimes. There were days where we get fish fingers and it was awesome and things like that, but yeah, it was It was bad.
So
and you had to eat it all. You could not leave your chair until you ate everything.
What?
I know.
Oh my god.
This was just in my school in France. In England, I was like, I don't have to eat it. Are you sure? I remember going to the head teacher in France once, and it was ratatouille or something I hated, and I was like, I really don't want to eat this. Can I please throw it away? And she goes, no, think about the starving kids in Africa. And me being like a 6-year-old kid, I obviously came up with a great smart-ass reply, and I said, do you have a box? I'll ship it to them. I was like, I'm not eating this.
It's not original with Americans. Yeah. They do it in France too.
I remember very vividly one day, we had this, I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was like veal or some sort of meat. It was so chewy, I couldn't eat it. But I had to stay the entire day in front of my plate.
Oh.
My food got cold. I had to stay the entire day. And eventually when school got out, I got to leave. But we got good. Thankfully, they bought these cups. These like IKEA cups that you couldn't see through. So we cram all our food in there and pile the cups so that you couldn't tell that there was food. One day we're like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to put all our plates in the middle and make just one big pile. And then we're just not going to eat it. And she came by, and she scooped it up between everybody and made us eat it.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, I don't think that's a Scientology thing. I think she was crazy.
Yeah, that's not a Scientology thing.
But that tells you how crazy it is. Like, I used to stuff food in my mouth, and I used to go like this to say I had to go to the bathroom, and then just spit it all out and then flush the toilet.
God.
Yeah. That's how bad that was with food.
And again, your parents are paying for this.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Wow.
But when Fish Fingers Day came around, which are fish sticks, I was like, yes.
Right.
Party time.
That was like Burger Tuesday for us in the Sea Organ base.
Yeah, exactly.
Every Tuesday it was like Burger Tuesday.
Yeah.
Burgers.
I also remember this was actually, I guess, half a good thing, half a bad thing, but in France it's pretty common to have snack time around 4 o'clock, especially if you're going to keep kids till 5:30.
Yeah.
You know? But they would send 2 kids down to the closest boulangerie, which is the bakery. Sometimes it was at least a mile of a walk. So you sent 2 kids to go get the bread.
Right.
So the kids would go to the closest bakery, get a whole bunch of loaves of baguette. I remember once just walking by like that. And luckily they have a tab. But we'd come back and we'd have goûter, which is nighttime.
And
we'd have a little bar of chocolate that we could put in our bread and things like that. So.
Wow. Okay. So there was some sustenance in the afternoon.
Yeah, the more we talk, the more I'll refer back to things. I'm
yeah,
sure,
no, totally.
So back
back to Greenfields.
Back to Greenfields.
Yeah.
Or the boarding house more specifically. We all had duties that we had to do.
Right.
And some of those duties, every day it would rotate. Or every week it would rotate, sorry. So I'd be doing stairs for a week. And then the next week I'd be dusting and so on. Whoever got kitchen duty would be cleaning for hours sometimes.
Wow.
Because there's like 60 kids. So, you're getting these big square plates. You're just like a busboy at a restaurant. You're putting all the plates in there, running them through the dishwasher, stacking them back, cleaning all the pots and pans. And
this was the whole time from you were 10 years old until you were graduated when you were 18?
Yeah, well, my parents ended up moving to England when I was 14.
Okay.
So I left the boarding school, but I was still going to Greenfields.
Okay, got it. So for 4 years, this was your life?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and then any break you have in the middle, you could play.
Okay.
But I have great memories from Coombe Hall. Like the 60 kids. On Saturdays, we'd set up these parties, and we had speakers. So we'd all set up all these mixers and play music and dance and things like that. Or
sure, so good times.
We'd play cops and robbers, which we'd split into, and half the team were cops and the other team were robbers, and the robbers would have to go out and hide. And the cops had to go find them and bring them in jail and all that stuff. So they were good times too.
Interesting. I have a question. I just realized something.
Yeah.
You have no English accent.
Yeah, this is
How does that happen?
This is fun. So when I moved from France to England and eventually learned English, I had this really horrible French accent.
Okay.
And I'd get teased for it. So the English kids would repeat, and make fun and all that stuff and make fun of my pronunciation. And so I tried really, really hard to sound English. So I trained my palate to not say run, but run, or to really sound like an English.
Get those R's.
Get the R's and all the other letters too.
Right.
Instead of Tabasco, Tabasco. So I really had to retrain a lot of words.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is now wherever I go, I start sounding like that. So.
Okay.
So when I first moved to America, I sounded English, but now I sound American. So if you ship me off to Australia, I'll probably come back sounding Australian.
All right, mate. All right, I get it.
Crikey.
Okay, got it. So so you're going to school, boarding school till you're 14. You graduate from Greenfields even after it wasn't boarding school anymore. You keep going there.
Yeah.
So you're doing the 9 to 5 schooling.
Yeah.
So your parents, when you were 14, moved back to England. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, because then you weren't going to boarding school, now you're living with them.
Yeah.
So they weren't living were they living at St. Hill? How did that go down?
No, so they were still Sea Org members up until maybe the year or a few months before they moved back to England.
Okay.
They went on to staff after that.
How did that happen? Why did that happen, or how did that happen? Do you know?
Part of it was financial, so they could afford to pay for my school, so they could afford to pay rent and things like that. I know my grandma owned the flat, but just bills and things like that, and cars and things. And I think deep down part of it that things started getting worse was Scientology,
Yeah.
So financially they weren't getting paid as much. Not that they weren't ever getting paid that great, but my mom over the years started her own translation company with my dad's help, but it was mostly, she started off as an independent contractor. She would do her own translations. I remember her staying up till 2 or 3 in the morning sometimes, just typing away, and then because I'd come back on vacation, right, so I'd see her work and stuff. But eventually she opened up her own business, and and the opportunity came up. I remember this. I remember why.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this, I hated it because I still did not like England at the time.
Mm.
I was getting used to the food and the weather, but it rains a lot there, and I didn't like the food, and I was really looking forward to living back in France. But, so my parents had friends in England that were living pretty close to the school. And by the way, St. Hill is like
Yeah, it's like
50
right there.
minutes from the school, if
Right.
that.
Yeah.
So we had friends that had a house, or that were renting a house, and they wanted, she was French, but they wanted to move back to France. And they contacted my mom, and my mom was like, oh, well, maybe we could get Shane out of boarding school. Getting him out of boarding school would be cheaper than actually paying rent on this place. So they kind of swapped.
Huh.
We let this lady move into our apartment in France and pay rent,
Yeah.
that then paid for our rent
Okay.
in England, that then canceled them having to pay for my boarding school fees. So we kind of just completely swapped houses
Yeah.
with a whole bunch of mess in the middle.
Yeah.
And yeah, then I was officially not a boarder anymore.
Okay. So then you're just a full-time student
Full-time student.
going to school, but at this point, are your parents haven't moved there yet?
So
It's just
they,
you there?
No, they moved.
They moved there too.
Yeah,
Okay, so when this
completely.
whole swap happens,
Yeah.
they come over.
And then before that, my parents had progressively left the Sea Org and become staff members, and then eventually weren't even staff members anymore. And
Okay.
my mom had to run her translation business in order
Right.
to pay for all the bills and stuff.
Right. As with so many Sea Org members.
Yeah, exactly.
Who that happened to.
Exactly.
Right. In fact, I can't think of any.
Yeah,
Successful. Actually, no. I'm sorry. I can think of one couple
yeah,
out of the tens of couples that I know about
right.
who made it back into the Sea Org after their kids grew up,
Yeah,
themselves joined the Sea Org,
yeah.
and then the parents got
Well,
back in.
I often wondered if my parents were going to do that once I hit 18 and so on. But
Yeah.
they didn't,
They
because
didn't.
I ended up joining staff, so down the line. But
Right.
yeah, to go back to the move,
Yeah.
they both left the Sea Org. And when I blew from Scientology, I remember my dad making a reference to Mike Rinder, and him, as in Mike Rinder, being one of the reasons why my dad had to leave staff or something like that. Now I'm sure that's some stupid thing that my dad was saying to me to try to get me not to blow, to
Huh.
get me to realize how much of an SP Mike
goodness.
Rinder was.
Really?
But I was speaking to Mike Rinder at the same time, so it was just
Yeah,
Anyway.
we'll get to that
Yeah,
part
we'll get
of the
to
story.
that.
Yeah.
later.
Yeah. Okay.
So both my parents left the Sea Org.
All right.
My dad, and my dad had another job too in Belgium. So he'd still be working at the Human Rights Office in Belgium, but he would also be a writer or help with marketing for another company, which of course was a Scientology company. But
Right. Still entrenched in the Scientology world.
yeah,
They're just not staff members anymore in France, in Paris Org,
yeah,
because they moved to England,
yeah,
and now they're
yeah.
free spirits, so to speak. But
Yeah, so now they're in England. My mom's a translation company, so she works from home.
Yeah.
You know,
This is about 2004.
Yeah.
You were
Yeah.
You were 14.
exactly.
Okay.
2004.
Right.
So, or maybe 2005, something around there.
Okay.
But yeah, I moved there, so I left the boarding school and still back in Greenfields.
Back at home.
Just no more duties, no more 7 to 8 schooling, like homework time.
Right.
Another thing about boarding school,
Mhm.
it was very strict. So you get minus points. So remember, if you swear, you get -1. If you were late for any meeting, like duties, roll call, anything like that, you get -2.
Mm.
If you were up past your bedtime, you get -2. Anyway, if it totaled or went over -4, you'd be grounded.
Okay.
Grounded means you had to A, do extra duties, and B, you weren't allowed to leave and go into town, weren't allowed any electronics, so you couldn't watch movies, you couldn't really do anything.
Did they have you take your iPod or something?
Yeah, we didn't have those back then.
Oh.
DVDs were just coming out.
Oh,
you know,
right.
When I first got to boarding school. They wouldn't take it, but if you were caught with it, you'd be in even deeper trouble.
Right.
And then
Okay.
they would confiscate it.
Right.
But I remember, I mean, it's not like you had that many electronics in the first place, which I guess, looking at it nowadays, is probably a good thing. But even as a regular, not grounded boarder, you'd only be allowed to watch about a movie a week.
Okay.
So Friday night was our movie night.
Okay.
We'd all have dinner, we'd all do duties, and after that, if you weren't grounded...
You could go watch a movie.
Yeah.
Wow, it really is like the Sea Org. It was like a little mini Sea Org.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
And it was... The guy who ran the boarding school at the time when we were at Coombe Hall, because the first 2 years of boarding school were at Coombe Hall,
Okay.
and then we got rid of Coombe Hall, and the boarding school moved into Greenfields. So they redid the whole attic of Greenfields, and that became the boarding school.
Huh.
Yeah. But Jeff Smith, who I mentioned earlier, who was the awesome physics teacher,
Yeah.
he was also running the boarding school. So
Okay.
he lived at Coombe Hall with his family and was the head of the boarding school.
Okay.
And he'd head up all the boys, and then there was a separate building for all the girls.
Oh.
Yeah.
Segregated.
Very, yeah.
Very.
Yeah, very. Painfully so.
Yes. Girls, there were no girls there.
No,
yeah, they were
we'd all
so far
eat
away.
together, we'd all do studies together, we'd all hang out together,
Okay.
but we would
When it
sleep
came
in.
time to
Yeah.
sleep, it was...
No.
Okay. Were there any violations of that? Did anybody
Oh,
ever
yeah,
sneak
all the
around?
time,
Yeah,
yeah.
of course they did.
Yeah, we all got grounded
Yeah,
for
right.
trying to sneak over
Getting
there.
caught
Yeah.
with the girls. Now, okay, so that actually opens the door to a question I was going to ask, which is ethics, Scientology
Yeah.
ethics, right? Now, Scientology ethics meaning conditions formulas,
Yeah.
withhold write-ups.
Yeah.
When did that become part of what your life was, or did that ever become part of it at the school?
So when I was still in France, I think I remember doing a couple ethics type things during my last year there.
Wow.
Nothing big, just,
Okay. 10 years old.
not necessarily, 10 years old. Not necessarily opening the book and going, here's the condition that you're in right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember somebody walking me through the conditions. What would you do? You know? So
Like
it
a
did-
lower condition, maybe, or
Nothing bad.
okay, just
but
regular conditions.
whatever the first bad one is, where you have
Liability.
to change your routine. No.
Emergency. Change
Yeah.
your operating basis and stuff.
something-
Yeah.
yeah.
There's a series of steps. Hubbard calls them conditions formulas. The formula being this, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And by doing these steps, you're supposed to improve your condition in an area or in your life in general. And these are called conditions formulas. And the conditions go from, at the top, power and affluence, to normal, which is kind of where you want to be, normal or affluence, down to emergency, danger, and then non-existence, which is like there's nothing there.
Yeah.
But in Scientology, there's also lower than non-existence conditions, which are called lower conditions. And that's where you've not only not existing, you're now in a condition where you're working against whatever the thing is that you're doing the conditions on, like a group, for example. Let's say you're a member of a corporation, and if you go below non-existence, they go liability, doubt, enemy, treason, confusion. And that's the scale of conditions. And if you go into those lower conditions, you're now considered to be working against the best interests of the group, and you're therefore a bad person. And lower conditions are ubiquitous. I mean, they're just everywhere in Scientology. People are constantly doing lower conditions.
Yeah.
So I was wondering,
Yeah.
how does that work in the school?
Never lower conditions.
Okay.
In France, I think purely because I was 10 and I was, all I do is play soccer in the yard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Football.
Sure.
But when I got to England and turned into a teenager and all that stuff, there was definitely, I did lower conditions a few times, yeah.
Okay.
There'd be times, I remember one time I climbed on the roof of Greenfields, and we had
Just on a dare or something? You're just interested in getting up there?
we had a bag of tennis balls. We're on the roof and we'd start throwing them down. We weren't trying to hit people, we were trying to scare them, and then we'd hide and stuff. And the head of the boarding school, which wasn't Jeff Smith by that point, it was somebody else, drove in, it was nighttime, drove into through the driveway, and just headlights were bright on us. And we're like 50 to 100 feet off the ground, and She's like, get down right now! And we were put in something pretty bad. We had to do mess work.
Okay, which is basically like labor.
Physical labor.
Physical labor,
and
yeah.
no schooling. Okay, so I missed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I missed at least a week, maybe 2 weeks. Yeah, because.
Wow, parents paying for this the whole time.
Yeah.
You're doing physical labor.
Physical labor.
As
so
punishment.
I was given a broom, so was my buddy, and we were put under a tree, and it was fall. Okay. So the leaves kept falling.
Right. This is in England.
This is in England.
Right.
And it's wet, so the leaves stick to the floor.
Ah, right.
So we were told to sweep this area until it was clean.
Right.
And then we would move on to something else.
Okay.
But I remember after a few days having blisters on my hands because leaves would keep falling
You're out
down.
there all day.
Yeah, all day.
Sweeping.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, we did. Then they moved us on to other things like spraying the grass and cleaning the dirt from the playgrounds and all that kind of stuff.
Wow, and you did this for a couple weeks because you threw tennis balls at people off the roof.
Well, the reasoning was we put the school in danger by placing ourselves on the roof.
Yes,
which
of
I
course.
get, but I mean.
Yeah, you were a liability, man. You were.
Yeah, exactly.
You were worse than non-existence.
Yeah.
You were now working against the group.
I'm horrible.
Yeah, you're a horrible person.
Yeah, there were a few more times where I sneaked off. So Greenfields is surrounded by Ashdown Forest, which is a beautiful forest. And Ulrich mentions it tons of times. But those are considered out of bounds. And I would sneak off out of bounds a lot of times with the kids. And we found a river and we set up a swing and we'd go swing across the river. And sometimes somebody would fall and come back completely soaked. And I'd be like, where have you been? And be like, and they'd know by now. You know,
Right.
we had set this up. So
Interesting.
We got put there a lot. But
Interesting. So, just a question. When you were doing those conditions, did they pull out the Scientology ethics book and throw it in front of you? Or
yeah.
And so you knew this was Scientology.
Yeah.
No question about it.
Yeah, I knew, but again, I never questioned it because I grew up with it.
Right.
You know?
This is just how the world works.
Yeah, I was like, okay. To me, it was a Scientology school. The school itself would never represent itself as a Scientology school. It always represented itself as a applied scholastic school.
Oh yeah, maybe we should differentiate on this
Yeah.
right now. Okay, so applied scholastics is a social betterment group. Is an SBC is what they call it in the church hierarchy.
Right.
And applied scholastics has the function. It is part of the church.
Yeah.
As as a corporate entity.
Right.
But it is its own entity. Applied Scholastics International.
Right.
And its job is to get L. Ron Hubbard's study technology
out to people.
Out into schools.
Yeah.
And get it used.
Yeah.
So this was an applied scholastic school.
So while we don't teach Scientology, we only teach applied scholastics.
Except you're doing ethics
but
conditions.
Scientology kids
right.
got conditions.
Right.
I'm sure other kids, I think other kids got conditions too, non-Scientology kids.
That's what I was just saying. I'm wondering, were there non-Scientologist families sending non-Scientologist kids to the school?
Yeah, and that's why they marketed themselves as a applied scholastic school, because applying yourself as a Scientology school is more of a negative term.
Right.
And tends to scare people away. But if you're, oh no, we don't do Scientology, we only do study tech.
Right.
But clearly the whole study tech, the whole school organization is set up on Scientology principles. Because you walk down the hallway and there's an org board right there.
Okay, which is the organizing board.
Yeah, with qual, which is the qualification division, which is where you go take your tests and your exams.
Yeah.
With tech, which is where all your teachers are, where you go study. With treasury, with
communications office.
Yeah.
Okay,
with marketing.
Right. So the organizing board is a 7-division board of divisions. There's 7 divisions, and it's basically a command structure that Hubbard invented to run an organization. Has the actual structure of an organization, and a lot of Scientology organizations use this thing called an organizing board to structure their companies. And so they have a standard set, Division 7, which is executives, Division 1 is communications, so on. And this structure is, can be adapted to any company or any organization. So here we have an applied scholastic school
using.
But it's full of Scientology.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
all the executive members at the school are Scientologists, and
Right.
90% of the teachers are Scientologists. So
Right.
you go into the exec's office, and all the volumes are there. You know what I
Okay,
mean?
right. So all the policy volumes and the technical volumes, all the Scientology
Not
stuff.
the tech volumes.
But the policy volumes.
Some tech volumes, but definitely the policy volumes.
Good. Did you ever see A History of Man laying around when you were at school, or a Dianetics book, or
Definitely Dianetics.
Fundamentals of Thought, or anything like that?
You know, I don't remember on how many of the basic books were there.
Yeah.
Definitely Dianetics for sure.
Okay.
I didn't
Ethics
really.
book.
I definitely saw. What was the one with the snake on it?
Dianetics 55.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I definitely saw that one laying around.
That's one that's primarily about communication.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The snake on it. It's
Well,
been covered for a long time. Yeah.
Because I've read all those books, but with the new covers on
Right.
them. So I don't know the basic.
Oh yeah. Now they used to have these crazy weird covers on them, and one of them was a guy in a white outfit with a white helmet, and he was grappling with a snake and coming out of a tree, and that was the cover.
I'm not sure what that has to do.
You know, it's supposed to mean something, and all these things were actually they have significances, Scientology significances,
Yeah.
Hubbard whole track stuff,
Yeah.
right? Which is just total Scientology mysticism. So
Yeah.
interesting.
We did do contact assist too.
Oh, you
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, I mean, I remember Greenfields is. I mean, I loved it, but there's the main school right there. Then there was a soccer field here, and then there's another hard court. It was 3 tennis courts back to back, but
Yeah.
people also played soccer on there too, or at the games and stuff. And it was all open space back here, right? So whenever one person would get hurt, the entire school would just shh.
The whole
one
quiet
thing.
thing.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Because there's a contact assist, and the second the person would get up and be fine, then we'd start playing again. But
Right,
everything would
of course.
stop, not one noise. And of course, the kids that aren't Scientologists, that have no idea what contact assists are like, the hell is going on?
Right.
And they'd keep playing and screaming, and they'd be like, shh, what are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
Yeah, let me play soccer.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is a Scientology thing, because with Dianetics, actually, it's a Dianetics thing where if there's a person who's injured, you're not supposed to make any sounds because those sounds are supposed to be going right into,
Your
their
subconscious
reactive
mind.
bank, their subconscious, and then they will have detrimental effects on the person later. So you're supposed to
Yeah.
be quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this big thing. So, okay, so basically you're totally being raised in a total Scientology environment.
100%. My whole life I've been in a bubble.
Right, at a not Scientology school.
Yes.
It's just using the Hubbard methods.
Yeah.
Right.
But everybody is speaking Scientologies.
Right.
You know, I'm saying words like Satan, and I'm saying words like.
Oh really?
Words.
So even the full on terminology.
Oh yeah, but I have next to no idea what the full extent of those words mean. That's just what my parents spoke.
Right.
You know, so that's how I spoke.
Right.
So.
Interesting.
Oh yeah, when I did more courses, when I did all the basics, later, I actually understood what I was saying.
Right.
You know, I understood all the terms that my parents were using and all that
Right.
stuff. Because I knew the basics of what a contact assist were, like how to do it. I never knew what it was for. You know, like how in Scientology that's supposed to help you and all that kind of stuff.
It was just a rote thing that you just learned how
Yeah,
to
it
do.
was
You had no idea what you were even doing it for.
No. You know, I thought it was
Wow.
supposed to help with the pain,
Right.
you know, to try to do the incident over and over again.
Yeah,
I
touch it back.
never realized, again, the Dianetics thing, it was supposed to get rid of the pain and then in your reactive mind. and all that
Interesting.
stuff. Yeah.
Interesting. And this is a very interesting point because this is all over in Europe. This is in England.
Yeah.
It's the same drill over here.
Yeah.
So it's same.
Yeah.
You know, which is actually kind of an important point.
Right.
You know, it's
It's-
marketed the same. They tell the same lies
Yeah.
to the public.
Yeah.
You know, no, this isn't Scientology.
Right.
We're not doing Scientology here.
No, of course not.
You know, no,
Yeah.
you pay us, and we'll just teach your kid really good with the Hubbard method.
Yeah. Luckily
Wow.
for me, the teachers were pretty good.
Right.
And I liked my teachers, and I became friends with my teachers, and I could go to my teachers, and they cared about me, and they helped me understand and things like that.
Well, and of
So-
course, and actually, of course, in all fairness, I mean, my experience as well with Delphi, Los Angeles, Delphi, Oregon, which are Scientology schools in the same way that Greenfield was,
Yeah.
private boarding school type situations. the people who work there really do honestly care about the kids.
Yeah.
They are there because they want to do the work they're doing.
Right.
So it's not like...
But they're not necessarily a certified and trained teacher.
Right.
Because the laws are a lot more loose over here.
That's right.
I know for a fact, my stepdaughter, Brianna,
yeah.
Or Summer, she likes to go by nowadays.
Oh, I see.
I know that she missed out on some education because of that.
Yes.
You know? So
that is a key difference, actually. It's an interesting difference, that England is more strict.
Right, because I missed out on some subjects that I really wish I could have learned or had the opportunity to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the amount of limited kids and limited teachers, there were limited subjects that we could pick from.
Right.
But we got all our basics. I mean, English lit, languages, theater studies, all the sciences like physics, biology, chemistry, we got sports, all that stuff. So we got most of everything. I just wanted to hone in on some stuff that I never really got the chance to.
Hey everyone, I have very good news. What I'm announcing here is the culmination of 2 years of work on my part to expose Scientology and give you the actual facts about what really goes on behind its closed doors. I've completed and published what I believe to be the definitive guide to Dianetics and Scientology, titled Scientology A to Xenu, An Insider's Guide to What Scientology is All About. Why should you get this and read it? Well, if you want to understand how people are lured into destructive cults like this and why they stay, this book gives you those answers. If you want to know what Scientologists really believe and why they're willing to cash in their children's college funds, take out second and third mortgages, and even forsake family and friends, this book gives you those answers. If you want to understand why Scientology has amassed so much money and power, and why it seems that the police and the courts are powerless to stop them, those answers are in here as well. Was L. Ron Hubbard serious about Dianetics and Scientology, or was it all just some big con job from the very start? What did he really believe? Why did he start Scientology, and despite all his wealth and power, why did he die alone and afraid? Finally, everyone has heard that Scientology believes in space aliens and some guy named Xenu, and we've all seen South Park. But is that the whole story? Not even close. There's a lot more to know about why Scientologists think they're saving the world, and I break it all down piece by piece. I believe you will not find a simpler and more complete explanation of Scientology's confidential scriptures anywhere else. My own personal story is in here and in more detail than I've ever discussed before. How I grew up in Scientology, why I started working for them, and eventually joined the Sea Organization, and what happened exactly that made me come to my senses and get out. All of that is just chapter 1. For anyone who seriously wants to understand Scientology, you cannot do it without this book. It comes with a complete glossary of terms and an organizing chart so you can see the Scientology hierarchy and how it all works. It comes in paperback and as an ebook. I'm currently recording it as an audiobook as well. Buy it at the CreateSpace e-store or on Amazon today. I've put links to both in the description below. To all my fans and subscribers, thank you so much for your support over these past 2 years. You have made this possible. Believe me when I tell you, this is just the beginning. Stay tuned because a lot more is coming in this new year. Thank you for watching.